In the summer of 1944, the skies over Nazi-occupied Europe trembled with bombs and gunfire. The Allied air offensive was reaching its most brutal stage. Every day, hundreds of bombers rose from the fields of southern Italy, heading north, over enemy territory, toward oil refineries, railways, and German supply lines. For the men inside those planes, each mission was a gamble with death. They could see the flak bursting outside the cockpit, feel the engines shudder as bullets ripped through steel. Deep in the mountains of central Serbia, far from the front lines, a small, nameless village stood quietly. No radio, no electricity, just farms, dirt paths, and people struggling to survive another year of war. No one there could have imagined that within weeks, their valley would become the stage for one of the most extraordinary rescue operations of the entire Second World War. By mid-1944, the tide of war was turning against Germany. Allied bombers dominated the skies, targeting everything that kept the Nazi war machine alive, especially the oil fields of Romania. But the path back from those missions was deadly. Bombers low on fuel or crippled by flak often crashed over the Balkans. Many crews never made it home. Some parachuted out, landing in forests, rivers, and mountain villages, alone, wounded, terrified, hunted. The territory they fell into was occupied by German forces. Patrols swept through every valley. Anyone caught helping Allied soldiers faced death, not just for themselves, but for their entire family. Yet in one remote corner of Serbia, things unfolded differently. The village of Pranjani, nestled among rolling hills and narrow dirt roads, was small, perhaps a few dozen homes at most. The villagers were poor, surviving on potatoes, goats, and what little they could grow under the shadow of occupation. They had seen soldiers march through before, first Yugoslav, then German, then partisans. War was nothing new. But one day, a group of locals looked up and saw white parachutes drifting against the sky. Wounded men, young Americans, fell into the fields, their uniforms torn, their faces burned, their bodies bruised. Without hesitation, the villagers ran to help. They carried the airmen into barns, hid them in attics, and tore up their own bedsheets to make bandages. They knew what would happen if the Germans found out, yet they helped anyway. One woman later told her grandson, "They were so young. They could have been our sons. We didn't see soldiers. We saw children who needed us." As weeks passed, more parachutes appeared over the hills. Each new arrival meant more mouths to feed, more danger, more risk. German patrols increased. Informers lurked. The villagers began moving the Americans from house to house, always at night. Some pilots were hidden in sheep pens, others in haylofts, cellars, or mountain caves. They lived on bread, cheese, and boiled potatoes, grateful for every breath. Meanwhile, word reached the American command in Italy. Hundreds of downed airmen were alive, deep inside enemy territory. A rescue had to happen, fast. The message came from General Draža Mihailović, leader of the Chetnik resistance. His men, allied with the local villagers, had been protecting the Americans for months. The Americans were skeptical, communication lines were unreliable, and the politics of Yugoslavia were a maze. But when proof arrived, letters from airmen, coordinates marked on maps, there was no more doubt. The OSS, America's wartime intelligence agency, devised an unprecedented plan: build a secret airfield behind enemy lines and fly the men out. It was a mission so dangerous, so improbable, that even those planning it doubted it could work. Yet the villagers agreed. They would build the runway themselves. Every night, men, women, and children worked in silence. With shovels, picks, and their bare hands, they cleared a meadow on a hillside. They cut trees, leveled the ground, and smoothed the soil until a flat strip emerged, long enough for a transport plane to land. They called it Galley Field. No machinery, no maps, no engineers, just courage and hope that the Germans wouldn't notice the missing trees. Within 8 days, the impossible runway was ready. And then they waited. On the night of August 10, 1944, the villagers gathered in silence. Far above the valley, the drone of engines broke through the clouds. A U.S. C-47 transport plane appeared, just a dark silhouette against the moonlit sky. It descended, bounced hard on the uneven field, and came to a stop. The villagers ran forward, lighting the way with lanterns. The first 12 airmen climbed aboard. The plane lifted off, disappearing into the darkness. The mission had succeeded. Over the next weeks, flight after flight returned, each one carrying men to safety. In total, 512 Allied airmen, mostly Americans, were rescued from the heart of Nazi territory. Not one was lost, not one was captured. The Germans eventually discovered fragments of what had happened. They burned villages, executed those suspected of helping. Some families vanished entirely. Their homes turned to ash. Yet not one person betrayed the secret of the Americans. When the war ended, the villagers went back to their lives, plowing fields, mending fences, burying their dead. No medals, no headlines, just memories. In the years that followed, Yugoslavia fell under communist rule. The story of Operation Halyard was buried, its heroes silenced by politics. American airmen returned home, grateful but unable to speak of the people who had saved them. For nearly 50 years, the world forgot what happened in those mountains, but history has a way of finding its voice again. In the 1990s and early 2000s, surviving American pilots began searching for their rescuers. They found them, elderly men and women living simple lives, some in the same stone houses that once sheltered strangers. When they met again, there were tears, embraces, and silence too deep for words. One pilot told a reporter, "They saved our lives, and for 50 years, no one even knew." Memorials were built. Flags of both nations raised side by side. The world finally remembered what courage in silence looks like. The story of Operation Halyard isn't about strategy or weapons. It's about humanity. How ordinary people, in a forgotten village, chose compassion over fear. In the darkness of 1944, when the world was burning, a handful of villagers lit torches to guide strangers home. Because of them, more than 500 young men lived to see their families again. Their runway has vanished, their homes rebuilt, but their story remains, carved into the soul of those mountains. These are not the heroes you find in textbooks. They are the ones who stood quietly in the shadows of 1945 and made history without ever meaning to. Thank you for watching. Subscribe for more untold stories from the shadows of war.